Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman. Now I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. If you have been following along with the Seaman, specifically on Twitter, you know that, a couple days ago I was out marathoning once again. And no, I'm not talking about running, I'm talking about viewing. And we weren't doing 60 plus hours like we did for Marvel, only 24 hours, not 22 movies, just 9. And I thought this was the only way to finish this saga was to see them all on the big screen back to 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 back. Maybe that was 9. I'm not sure. You do the counting, but to watch them all in a row, and specifically, like for me, I'd never seen the original trilogy on the big screen ever. This was my first time, and it was so good. But I really did think this was the perfect way to watch this saga play out, and for me, it enhanced the experience of the final movie. I've come home since, I've rested, I've watched the movie again, and now I'm ready to talk about it. What are we talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair, man? Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in, spoiler free, into Star Wars Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker. And like I said, man, I loved me some Rise of Skywalker. This thing was awesome, dude. Like, look, I understand that all of these movies have flaws. All of these movies have really, really wonderful Star Wars moments, and this movie is no different. And I understand that, especially after doing 24 hours straight of Star Wars and watching this movie, in my head, I was like, I get that some people are not going to like this movie. That's just inherent. But if you're like a true Star Wars fan, you should love this movie. Since then, I've been able to step out of that realm and go, look, there are going to be people that don't like this movie. Specifically, if you were a fan of The Last Jedi, you like a real diehard fan of The Last Jedi. I like The Last Jedi, but I understand its problems as well. And if you went back to the very first review we ever did on this channel, which is The Last Jedi, you'd see I was very much like I was on Twitter after The Rise of Skywalker. A lot of pros, all pumped up, and then you kind of can step back and go, well, there is some problems, but I think diehard Last Jedi fans might not like this movie. I think some diehard Star Wars fans might not like this movie because they just inherently have not liked the Disney stuff. And I understand all that. And I think going into a film like The Rise of Skywalker, if you haven't seen it yet and you want to be able to enjoy it, I think context is really important. Look, I get this last trilogy is not perfect. It's got lots of issues. And its biggest issue is the fact that there was no concrete outline or structure to what these 3 movies were going to be before they went into them. We've seen it with Marvel, we've seen it with George Lucas's Star Wars films. There was a clear plan of what to do for those 3 movies and how those 3 movies would tell one overarching story. You come into this and J.J. Abrams picks it up, but the plan was never for J.J. to do all 3. It was supposed to be 3 different directors. But there was no outline, and when Rian Johnson gets Last Jedi, he kind of throws most of what JJ did out, and then Chris Terrio steps away and JJ steps back in, and now JJ is left with this kind of conundrum of, I started this over here, I had an idea of where I wanted to take this story. Rian Johnson did this, now I'm back, how do I tell the end of that story with everything Rian Johnson did? And if you go back and watch, I don't know if I said it in my reviews, but around The Last Jedi, after I saw the movie, I went, look, I liked this. There's some amazing Star Wars moments in it, but I feel like 2 movies still need to happen because Last Jedi didn't really advance the story anywhere. It gave us really cool things, but it's essentially a long car chase that ends exactly where it began, only the rebellion is way worse off than it was at the start of that movie. So coming into this, I think if you understand that JJ has to not only clean up the Rian Johnson mess, and get this thing back on the track of that he's thinking about, but he also has to, conclude the entire saga. And when you look at all of that, I really think JJ did the absolute best job he could with what he had in front of him. And this movie might course correct some things from Last Jedi to get us back on track into what JJ was thinking. I think if JJ did all 3 movies, I think we would be having far different conversations about this trilogy. But JJ essentially had to try to do 2 movies inside of one to kind of clean up what was missing in the middle and then deliver and execute on the end. And stepping out of my body, I understand that some of these things will seem lazy or like a really long reach because some of these things, specifically, mild spoiler, but like we already know, the Emperor is in this movie, and the stuff surrounding the Emperor is kind of one of those things that feels like lazy writing or like a really, really long reach. And that's where I think if JJ had done the second movie, he probably sets that story up better and it executes better at the end. But if you can just go with it, that's my thing, man. Just go with the movie. I genuinely think that you will fall in love with the film. It'll emotionally connect with you. I mean, I was laughing, I was crying, I was cheering. Every emotion that you have in a Star Wars movie, I was giving out there in the theater, because JJ really, really does right by his new cast members, right? Like the cast for this trilogy, I think it's the strongest movie for all three of them. Oh, it was so much fun to finally watch all three of them be together and do stuff for like almost half of a movie. Like all together, that stuff is so enjoyable. And this, honestly, I think is the perfect ending to this trilogy. When you look at the overarching story, it might be harder to say that it's the perfect conclusion to the Star Wars saga, because most likely George Lucas probably gives us something different. And there's probably a different story that you can tell that honors Han, Luke, and Leia a lot better. And all these things, but that's not what we have, man. You gotta go with what we got, and I think with what we got, JJ delivers tons of fan service. It's one of those things, again, like watching all 9 of these in a row, you see all the secular things within the trilogy, and then those secular things that come around and around not only exist in the trilogies, but also exist in the overarching saga. And JJ nails all of those things, and there are tiebacks into all the movies where, look, it's a lot of fan service, and I'm always here for fan service because I'm a fan, and I want to feel the nostalgia, and I want to feel like it's connected to everything, and I want there to be an epic, grandiose finale, and that's everything that's in this movie. It's just whether or not it works for you, but I think if you go with it, the callbacks and the way, like, he services every movie to some degree and every character in ways that I just think honor Star Wars. For me, this is J.J. Abrams' love letter to Star Wars. And it's really kind of like a direct sequel to The Force Awakens. And those two movies together are really a love letter to Star Wars from J.J. And I appreciate that stuff. So for me, yes, I understand now. Stepping out of my body, seeing it a second time, yes, there are some problems with this movie. There are some problems with all of the Star Wars movies. But at the end of the day, man, it put me in that place and made me feel like I was watching an epic Star Wars conclusion, and that's what I wanted. So I thought that the writing worked. I like this story. Like I said, I think it's the perfect conclusion to this trilogy, and overall, it's just something that I thought JJ executed really well on, as best as he could with what was given in front of him. Then you just throw in everything that we get in this movie, man. Like, from the action, oh my gosh, dude, the action in this movie might be some of the best Star Wars action we've ever seen. This is one of the all-time Star Warsiest Star Wars movies, which could be good or bad depending on how you're looking at it, but the action is just phenomenal, dude. The opening to this movie might be one of the most metal openings we've ever had in a Star Wars movie. Like, you just sit there, man. By the time you get to the end of this opening sequence, I had reclinable chairs. My chair was up. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, whoa, like, okay, man, we're just going right into it. And it does. This movie starts with a bang. And you just kind of, it's one of those things where, like I said, you just got to go with it. Because essentially it feels like we're missing a movie. But if you just go with it, oh man, dude, like, the opening is so metal. Then, like I said, we finally get our trio. We get Rey and Poe and Finn all together for like almost half the movie, going out and doing things, and everything they do together is just wonderful, dude. Like, I really, really enjoyed watching this trio. I think this movie services that group the best out of any of the ones in this trilogy. One, because they're all together finally, but two, like, just the things that they're asked to do, the way they interact. I've had issues with Poe and Finn at different times in all of the movies, and this one I thought did them the best. I thought it gave them the best storylines for their characters and really amplified who all these characters were so well, and they did it while they were together. And the action sequences they get to go on are fun. They get a lot of fun moments the whole kind of stretch that they're in. I mean, there's this kind of big celebration thing that they kind of go by, which is really neat, that leads into this kind of cool like chase sequence that's just awesome. Like, oh, all of the visuals are great. And then you start building to the finale, man. And when we start getting into the Kylo and Rey action sequences, mind-blowing, dude. And there's just so many cool elements to each one that happens and how they function and what they do and the lightsaber work. We're going to talk about lightsabers, man. But there's like the work that they do with them. Like, it's one of those things where I'm a huge lightsaber geek. I mean, it's one of those things when you're a little kid and you see your first lightsaber just go, you like to do the noises. When you get your first lightsaber, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And each trilogy has a different approach to the lightsabers. The original was more of a basic and more about the story that was going on, where it was just the first time we were ever seeing it, so you're like, wow, that's cool. And then episodes 1 through 3 bring in Ewan McGregor and eventually Hayden Christensen, and Obi-Wan and Anakin's lightsaber skills are the best you'll ever see in any of these movies. And the way they move, they're so fast, they're so precise, and it's wonderful to watch. And then when you get to this movie, they approach these sequences differently. And I can't really talk about it because it might be a spoiler, but pay attention to how Rey and Kylo fight in this movie at the beginning and how they fight and use their lightsabers at the end. There's a clear, distinct change, and I think it plays into the storyline and executes in a way where I just sat there and I was like, wow. So, look, for me, even though like JJ kind of undoes some of what Last Jedi did and kind of, it's almost like an apology to the people who hated The Last Jedi. Like, look, watch that movie and watch this movie and see, like, it kind of sets it up. I think JJ makes this trilogy work the best through the writing of this movie, where I think it elevated Last Jedi, it even elevated Force Awakens for me. And that's in the context of watching them all in a row, not just having not watched them in a while and then watching this movie. That was the feel I got. So, story's working, the action is great, the acting is fantastic. JJ gets the best out of all of his actors. But the score, oh dude, John Williams, like, we've seen now with Ludwig Göransson over on The Mandalorian that you can give the Star Wars score to different people and they can do some different things and kind of update it, but make it still feel inherently Star Wars. You might have to take a little while to get there, but the feel and the sound is there, and it's cool and it's different, it's inventive, and eventually I think it kind of wins you over. But if you're doing the saga, you gotta stick with the OG, man. Like, John Williams delivered a score in the original Star Wars that's just, it's probably the most iconic score of all time. And here, he is doing some of his best work to date, and maybe best work in the Star Wars universe, dude. The score is so good. Like, as the movie is just continually climbing, right? I think it's always going this way. Once you put the score in, John Williams' score is pushing the movie that way. Like, it just elevates everything from the action to the drama to the emotional sequences. It's pinpoint perfect work from John Williams. I promise you, you can feel however you want to feel about this trilogy, about this specific movie, but there is no denying that John Williams' score is tremendous. So, I mean, all of that together, I think you end up with a really solid flick here. And the cast, I think it's the best version of all of these characters. I think it's the best story and the best utilization of all of these characters. And like I said, it really is a perfect wrap-up for them. Now, granted, we got to reach for a few things because there are going to be gaps in the storytelling because you just can't pack it all into this movie. But ultimately, where Daisy Ridley's Rey ends up, I think it might come off as a little bit like, oh man, she advanced kind of quick. But when you start watching her train to be the Jedi that she becomes and how the Force is awakening within her throughout the whole movie, I just think it's a really, really awesome thing to watch. And you just kind of see her grow, albeit kind of quickly. But if you go with it, watching it is so much fun. And I think Daisy Ridley is just awesome. Like, I think she crushes this role. I think this is her best performance, and I think throughout all three of these movies, she's been really, really strong, like a rock solid female lead to lean on without Leia. She really owns it and carries a good portion of this thing, but she doesn't do it alone. She does it with Adam Driver, who, Kylo Ren is my favorite character in this trilogy, man. He was from day one. I just thought he was interesting. I love Adam Driver as an actor. He's so good, dude. Like, there's a stretch in this movie that is like career best performance stuff from Adam Driver. I think, like, he crushes this role from an acting standpoint. And then same thing, his action sequences and the physicality to him. I mean, he's involved in that opening that we watched. I said was real metal. And he makes you buy all of it because he's so good. And that connection between Rey and Kylo still exists, is still very, very strong, and is the focal point, the center of everything that's happening, is that relationship. And I think JJ really fleshes it out quite well. I think he utilizes it to his advantage, and he makes those two characters pop the most. And when they're together, you can't help but just go, yeah, let's go. Like, you love watching anytime, whether they're fighting each other, whether they're having those force video chat calls, and the way they have them here, that even advances. Like, there's more to the way that they can communicate with each other, and allows JJ to do some really, really cool things later in the movie where you're just like, oh, that's amazing. So your two main leads, absolutely brilliant. I think they've been brilliant all three films. Now, the other two guys, Poe and Finn, I enjoy Oscar Isaac and John Boyega a lot as actors, and I have enjoyed them in these movies. I like what the characters are, but Force Awakens and Last Jedi, I have issues with both of them in those movies, and it's just like, why can't you guys learn from the things that you do that are mistakes, or things that make us like go, oh, come on, really, dude? And here, you don't get that, man. You get their bond is so strong, man. They're like two brothers, like best friends who just always, I mean, they were thrown into, fire together when they escape in Force Awakens. And that bond has been so tight and so strong from the very, very beginning. Here, it really flourishes a lot, and it brings in Rey in a way. We're watching these three work on screen, like I said before. It's so enjoyable. And what they ask Poe and Finn to do, important, their side quests and the things that they do pay off. They don't happen for no reason, kind of like what we got in Last Jedi. They matter, and they're important to the story and pushing the story, and they're perfect supporting pillars to Driver and Ridley. So the main group from the new movies, I think, really thrive and do their best work here. And JJ had a difficult task in front of him. I don't think if JJ was writing all three of these movies, he would have gone where we end up in this movie. I think Princess Leia was supposed to be super, super important. Some would argue that she should have been the Last Jedi in Last Jedi, and maybe if JJ does that movie, maybe that happens. But it felt like wherever they were going when it was written, something for Leia was going to be big, and then Carrie passes a year before Last Jedi comes out, and now you're kind of stuck in a situation where Kathleen Kennedy's like, she's not even going to be in Episode 9. You're like, no, man, like, you can't just have something happen off screen that's like Leia's dead. And JJ went back and found all this footage from Force Awakens, and you can tell a lot of it, I think, happens probably in a scene that we never saw that would have happened right before Rey went to go find Luke. I think that's where a lot of this comes from. And I'll say this, when you watch it, JJ had said he hoped that we do this so well that if you don't know, you would never know that that's what we were doing. Doesn't feel that way. Her lines and the things that they use feel like they're all they had, and they wrote around to kind of include it. You do get that vibe. However, like, dude, she's in like so much of the movie. Like, I think she's got 8 minutes total of screen time, but where he uses it and how he uses the moments that we have her, it's, yes, her lines and the deliveries, they don't feel like they hold a lot of weight because they're not connected to each other. She's not acting off of Daisy Ridley or acting off of a script for her. You're taking what you have and kind of inserting it, and it does feel that way. But at the same time, it's just so enjoyable and beautiful to watch Carrie Fisher on screen in the final Star Wars movie, and it gets you emotionally, man. And I think JJ did the absolute best that he could have possibly done in a situation where Kathleen Kennedy said we weren't going to have Princess Leia, and JJ found a way to incorporate her, and then found a way to give you, like, the moment for Leia. It's wonderful, and I think the moment may involve her real-life daughter, Billie Lourd, who's in the movie. And, like, if it is what I think it is going on in that scene, the emotional, like, impact of what goes on in this one little sequence. You're just like, yes, dude, like, that's everything I wanted. And I think he pays homage and tribute to Carrie in an absolutely wonderful way that if you're a Star Wars fan, if you're a Princess Leia fan, I mean, I'm getting emotional talking about it now, it should connect and resonate with you in a way that I think is really, really awesome. It's a little wonky feeling, but just having her there was so important, and I thought JJ did a great job of figuring out how to get her in the movie in a way that didn't feel terribly out of place, and I think it works within the context of what's going on. Then we have our droids and our Chewie. R2-D2, 3PO, Chewie from the original bit, they're all there. They all give you hardcore emotional beats, man. I promise you, R2, C-3PO, and Chewie will make you cry at different points in this movie, and it's touching, and they're utilized in the way that you should be utilizing these characters, and they bring in a lot of the humor. C-3PO will make you laugh a lot, and the things they do with 3PO are just wonderful. They're naturally Star Wars. Like the humor in this movie, it's one of those things people pointed out Last Jedi. It felt kind of forced at times. It didn't quite feel Star Wars-y. You will laugh a lot in this movie. There are a lot of funny moments. There's a new character that really elevates the humor, but it all feels natural. It feels Star Wars-y. And C-3PO has a lot to do with that. And R2, anytime R2's on screen, he's got a smaller role here, but when he pops up, you're just like, that little droid is the reason that all of this exists. Without that droid delivering that message, you don't ever get any of this. And, I think that what you'd want to see from them, we get. BB-8 is, of course, a huge part of this movie because he is this trilogy's droid, and he's fantastic, dude. I love BB, and the way he's functioned and utilized in the movie, again, just super, super enjoyable. There are two smaller new characters that I did mention, one named Babu Frick and the other named Dio. I won't give anything away about them, but pay attention to those names where they pop up. I promise you are going to love these little guys. They're awesome, so enjoyable, so inherently Star Wars-y in the feel. A lot of Star Wars-y stuff in this movie. But those two are great. I love Babu Frick is one of my new favorite characters immediately. He's such a cool little guy. And then I guess you could say that this is a mild spoiler, but it shouldn't be something that shocks anybody. There are Force ghosts in this movie because there are Force ghosts in a lot of these movies, and the utilization of the ghosts and which ghosts that we get, I think, are very poignant. They deliver very, very impactful moments in the movie, and I enjoyed the two times where I was maybe crying the hardest involved some sort of ghost memory type of interaction where you're just like, oh god, dude, like that's everything I want in this movie. This fan service, man. JJ, you might hate this movie because it's too much fan service, but for me, the fan service works, man, and he knows how to tap into that Star Wars emotion that exists in the center of all of our hearts for us diehard Star Wars fans. But I like the way they use the Force Ghosts. I like which Force Ghosts we got and how they're used in the movie. And then the last real big piece from this film is, of course, Emperor Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid is wonderful, man. He's back in this in a way that I don't think you would expect, and his role is more critical than I think most people would have expected coming into the film. But, and again, this is where getting to watch all 9 of these in a row really gives you context and subtext to a lot of stuff. The original trilogies are the Skywalker story. The Skywalker story is a through line. The A story through all of these movies involves a Skywalker. But you go back and you watch episodes 1 through 6, there is a B storyline and a second run through all 6 of those movies, and it's Senator / Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine's influence in episodes 1 through 6 is inherent. He is the mastermind behind everything that's going wrong or opposing the Jedi. So to not have him in the final 6 kind of feels weird when you look at it in contextually with these through lines and these storylines. And the way JJ uses the Emperor here makes that through line get you to the finish line, man. And it's something that I think some people might, like I said, say it was lazy. But if JJ were to tell me that he had this idea from the get-go, I would believe it. And I would believe it because of all the things that JJ and even Rian Johnson did with this trilogy. I think the most George Lucas thing, like something I could have seen George doing in this trilogy if he was writing it, is what happens with Palpatine. And yes, it's a bit of a shock. Yes, you have to kind of reach and you have to go with it. But once you kind of allow it to, and you go, okay, you know what? We're probably missing some stuff that could have been filled in here. Let's run with it. The way they use him, I think, is wonderful. The set and the presentation of the Emperor in this movie is magical. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time, and everything that surrounds the Emperor visually in this movie, specifically the finale, is breathtaking. I mean, the sets and the landscapes of the whole movie are great, but the Emperor and where he's hanging out, do some of the coolest stuff I've seen inside of the Star Wars universe. And while this isn't going to work for everyone, and I understand that because it has some issues, right? I think not having a structure and having a solid storyline arc established before going in hurts this trilogy. But I think JJ pulls it off at the end, man. I thoroughly enjoyed the rise of Skywalker and how they end this movie. I really thought it was just the most wonderfully touching tribute to this saga and to this story. And look, I know we're done with the saga, and when you get to the end, we're done with the saga, man. But you could keep going with Rey or with Finn or Poe or other characters that are from this universe, and I'd be totally in. If you wanted to make a Rey-centric film, which I don't think will happen, but if you wanted to, I'm in, because I really love Daisy Ridley and what she does. But to conclude this story, I think this does the best it possibly can. I think it opens up the world for other Star Wars things to now start being a thing. Let's not bombard us with Star Wars, Disney. Give us some breathing room in between these movies. I think that works better for this franchise. But keep going, man. Like, let's find more stories, because why get mad at a world where we have more Star Wars than anyone could have asked for? And you can't just say Disney doesn't know what it's doing, because Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni are doing some amazing stuff with some new Star Wars things around The Mandalorian. And if they're involved in the future going forward with the films, I think fans will be able to be far more positive all the time. So there you go, man. That's my very long-winded, non-spoiler review of The Rise of Skywalker. I commend J.J. Abrams for being able to safely land this plane that was heading for potential disaster, and it honors the saga, I think, the way this movie should. And it's fun, it's action-packed, it's emotional, it's funny, it's all the things you look for in a Star Wars movie. So I hope that you guys will go out and you'll see it and you'll enjoy it and you'll embrace it, because this is easily my favorite in this trilogy, and you know it ranks toward the upper half, I think, in my Star Wars rankings. So maybe we'll do some Star Wars rankings. I don't know. It is the holiday season. I've been very busy. I've got a whole bunch of reviews to get to. We haven't touched because I've been so wrapped up in Star Wars. But I appreciate you guys hanging around, for this one. It was a long one. There was a lot to talk about, man. This movie had a lot coming in. There's a lot to take away from it. Hopefully, I gave it to you in a way that you enjoyed. And now it's your turn, man. I want to know what you're thinking. How did you feel the conclusion of the Star Wars / Skywalker saga came to an end? Was it fitting? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Are you just not about the Disney Star Wars movies? Are you not about these characters? If you're not liking it, what wasn't working here? Did you have to reach too far to kind of go with this movie? Or were you able to ride it out like the old Seaman here and really enjoy a lot of fun action and wonderful heartwarming moments? Anything that you are thinking about The Rise of Skywalker, good or bad, try to keep it spoiler free, or let us know if it's going to be a spoiler. But please leave those comments down below in the comments section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new and you want to come hang out with the old Seaman anytime we talk in Star Wars, we've got the Mandalorian finale in a week. Just under a week, rather. You want to be here for that? You want to be here for any time we're talking movies or TV or trailer reactions? Then do yourself a favor, man. Pop over there. Come join the Cinema Sit-Down squad. Hit that subscribe button. I'll pop up in your feed if you want alerts right away, so you know, be the first to know when the Seaman drops something. Hit that alert bell that follows, if you so please. And I'll keep cranking on content over here for you guys. So I hope you come hang out. Let me know what you thought about the Star Wars movie, good or bad. And Till next time, man, for the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I am the C-Man, and I am signing off. May the Force be with you. Well, I'll be. You guys are still here. You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry. C-Man's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy. And if you haven't yet, and you want to come check out all the C-Man goodies, join the Cinema Sit Down squad, man. Hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the little bell down below that, too, so you can get alerts every time I make new videos.